Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Charlotte Mason Show. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and I am here with the amazing Shay Kemp again.
Hello.
Woo! For our book club that hasn't happened. We're going to do this every month, and then, there's that thing called life that kind of gets in the way sometimes of our plans, right?
Yes, and conventions.
It's okay.
Yes.
We are back in conventions and traveling. We were going to do one live at the convention, and then, we just decided to go out to dinner.
And we were so tired that nothing we would have said would have made any sense. So
after talking to people for like 10 hours, your brain is like, blah, 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 blah,
exactly.
blah.
It would have been.
So we decided to wait, but we are hoping to keep going here. Back on the wagon once a month. But, we're on chapter 4. Did we start this in January? No, we started in the fall.
Yes.
Let's just pretend we started in January. So now we're really on time.
We feel like
we're April.
Right. We're making progress.
Great.
This is what
that way the chapters will go with the months.
That's it.
And people can know what chapter we're on. So we're really just helping everyone out here. This is really our service. You're welcome.
Exactly. Now we're so much easier to follow.
Yes. Okay. Are there more than 12 chapters? How far does the book go?
It's long since I've read this one. It's really sad.
We'll have to maybe go into 2023, but that's okay.
All right. It's worth it. This book's
like Charlotte Mason says, right? This isn't a speed race.
No.
So it's good to take your time. And there's we are doing that and savoring it and letting the ideas take root and grow. And so we're just doing what she says. It's okay. Take your time. You don't have to digest all of Charlotte Mason's volumes in a day.
No, that's not going to happen anyway. My brain is not strong enough for that. One little bit, little bits at a time.
Exactly. Yeah, this is all we can take. So it's all good. So we're back and we are discussing chapter 4 of part 1, which is authority and docility, which are really fancy words. Mm-hmm. So, Charlotte Mason likes to use these like fancy words. So reading the title chapter, I was kind of turned off actually, because I was like, to me, authority kind of can get a bad rep.
Yes.
Also just, I don't know if you've had people in your life who've abused authority, like it makes you go, ooh, I don't want that. I don't want that in my life. And docility to me is kind of someone who takes abuse or someone who doesn't speak up for themselves. And I'm like, what's Charlotte Mason talking about?
Right. They're old-fashioned words for...
Yes. We add meaning to them in today's culture that Charlotte Mason did not have.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And they have, but the concepts are quite modern, actually, in terms of children. They were quite risque for her time as far as looking at children in these ways and the things that she talks about in this chapter. During her time, people did not see children in these ways.
And I think, too, when you read that in terms of children, you think authority, you think authoritative.
Yes.
Like an authoritative parent, right, who can, like I was saying, can have someone who abuses that power. And docile, like a child who just, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, everything you say, I don't ever have an opinion. I just stuff all my feelings and grow up and, whatever. So that's not what she's talking about.
No, it's not.
Thank goodness, right? But that was my first thought for me in the chapter. Going, ooh, no, I don't want to be authoritative. I don't want my children to just be docile and just do what I say all the time.
Yes, too much pressure on the parent. Get it all right. If you think that you're going to look at it in those terms. So
So how would you say that she starts out here? First she talks about authority. So to her, what is she talking about?
Well, when she discusses authority, she's talking about how it's just natural. Like we all are in authority and we all have authority over us. So we might not recognize that, but that it is part of our lives. And I think that's, she, over and over again, she talks about harnessing things that are already natural forces different times. And so this is just another one of those natural forces to harness. So it is there. Authority is there. So how do we use it in our homeschool so that in our, not just homeschool, but really life itself and with our children and our families. So how do we harness that so that it's actually useful? And she says order is the outcome of authority, which I love. She says order is heaven's first law. And so we all know that when everything is in complete disarray, you don't get anything done. So I like to try to think of that authority as more in the terms you're talking about, how we attribute these, wrong maybe definitions to them, that the authority is more the terms of what is the right order of things.
Yes. Right. And here she says, the principle in us, which brings us into subjection to authority, is docility, teachableness. Mm-hmm. And that also is universal. So I like the word teachableness more than docility.
Yes.
Do you have a teachable heart? I see it as that.
Yes.
And the authority being, yes, in natural order of things, certain people have authority over others. That's just the order like you're talking about. We need to respect that kind of order, not make that a power trip. I think she's also talking about that. So I think in both instances, it's coming from an attitude of humility.
Yes. And she even says, and this is ahead a little bit, but on
No, go ahead.
the next page, she says, a docility does not equal subservience.
Yes.
That docility implies equality.
And I'm going with that because I love what she says right after what you just said.
Yes, she says, there is no great gulf fixed between teacher and taught. Both are pursuing the same ends, engaged on the same theme, enriched by mutual interests, and probably the quite delightful pursuit of knowledge affords the only intrinsic liberty for both teacher and taught. I just love that quote. I had that underlined and circled and asterisk because on a daily level for school, if you can go into your day of learning, like I am also pursuing the same end as my children, which is a self education. Mm-hmm. Then I don't feel like I have to be authoritative. I'm not expecting them to be docile. I'm expecting us to be equal in our self education. And that really gives you so much, like she says, freedom there.
Yeah. And I think that is that spirit of humility, right? Like, because I'm your parent, because I'm in charge, I know everything. And you just have to just outright obey all the time. And, no, I'm perfect. So I'm going to point out all the ways you're not.
Yes.
Like we are on this path together. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm changing as a person, I'm developing better habits. And kind of seeing as we are both on this path together. We're both teachable. Are we both teachable? Right? Mm-hmm. I do have this natural authority over you. We do have this order, but I am humble enough to realize I don't have all the answers all the time.
Yes. And that's why we do things like this. That's why we continuously read these volumes. That's why, I'm continuously pursuing things and letting my children watch me. And I love this section after that because it says the mind is its own place, we are told, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. And that heaven of the mind, is it not continual expansion and ordered freedom? And that restless, burning, inflammatory hell, does it not come of continual chafing against natural and righteous order? And we both know homeschool can be either heaven or hell. I mean, it can be both. And so when we take that natural...
In the same hour.
In the same hour, exactly. I mean, sometimes in Bible time, I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah. But when we stop and we're really like, okay, continued expansion and freedom. So how is my freedom and my education expanding? How is theirs expanding? It makes such a difference between those two things. I just love that she goes there with that metaphor.
I think it's really interesting where in that part that you just read, where she's saying the mind can make its own place. Mm-hmm. In itself can make a heaven or a hell. Make a heaven of hell or hell of heaven. So it's actually talking about that in that one of the talks I give at the Great Homeschool Convention this weekend, kind of about our thoughts and how our thoughts affect our actions, and then our actions create a result, and then that result either confirms or shows contrary evidence to what it is we're believing. Most of the time it's going to confirm what it is that we're believing. We were creating that, right? And so it's if our minds are in a place of anxiety, and that causes us to act anxious towards our children, start to become a drill sergeant, start to put too much pressure on them, then they might rebel, they might push away, they might shut down. Then that causes us to be more anxious. And we think we're more of a failure, which then causes us to be more anxious. And then we keep doing those same things and keep getting that same result. Like, or we could look at the situation and go, I don't know, I'm trying to give it like they're struggling with sounding out some words during a reading lesson, right? It could be, oh my gosh, my child is never going to learn how to read. My child has a serious problem. I have to figure out what it is. I better go call 50 people and ask them what they think about my child not being able to read yet.
Yes.
Or it could be, I'm a horrible homeschool parent. I can't do this. My children are never going to learn if I can't even teach them how to read, how am I going to teach them high school? Like they're never going to graduate. And these thoughts just, we're making a hell of heaven right there.
Yes.
In our own head.
Mm-hmm. And I've done that and been there. And I really think, honestly, that it wasn't until my oldest graduated, this is just terrible, which was what, 5, 6 years ago, that all of a sudden I sort of realized, wait, I had all those anxious, like you're talking about.
Mhm.
So
Me too.
so many times I had those thoughts, and I realized, wow, he's super successful.
Mm.
He did super well, and these really do have the results. So
Mhm.
and there were times, of course, I would stop myself, but I do think since that time was kind of like, okay, Shay, you have to stop those thoughts because they're
Mhm.
not true. They're not true. And nobody stops those thoughts for you. Like she said, it's the mind is its own place.
Mm.
And in
Mhm.
itself, we're doing that to ourselves. And the more that we really understand, and I know you and I talk about this over and over again, and probably we're just, pounding this nail down again. But the more you understand this philosophy, and the more you understand these methods, and the more you understand the why,
Mhm.
the easier it is to intercept those thoughts that can turn
Yes.
it into a hell. The easier it is to
Yep.
stop those thoughts.
Yep.
Because most of the time, what's behind it is, oh, is this right? Should I be? Is this enough? They start with those little kernels. And so if we understand, okay, why am I doing copy work? Okay, that's right. Because this. Why am I requiring narration? This doesn't seem to work, but why am I? Okay, because this. Then you can intercept those thoughts because you
Mhm.
have that concrete reason.
The
Those
confidence.
and the
Yeah.
confidence, right?
Right.
Yes, which
Yeah, and
is
that's
why
the
we
importance
like
of
to.
having a philosophy and not just going, "Oh, I just bought this thing and now I'm going to do it." And then when it becomes hard, you're like, "Well, why am I doing this? Is this going to work? Oh, I should probably go find the next thing that might work." Rather than
Right.
going, "No, I'm sticking to these principles for a reason that are tried and true." You have the confidence to not get so anxious about something, or like I said in my talk, to get curious about what's happening, what is causing that anxiety, what may be going on inside your child that has actually nothing to do with the homeschool lesson. And
Right.
they might be not paying attention because they didn't sleep last night. You just don't know.
Right. And it goes back to the authoritative too, because the more educated I feel about
Mhm.
not just the Charlotte Mason philosophy, but other things, the more authoritative I feel in a positive way.
Mhm.
In an understanding way, my understanding is greater. And see, she's even says there, there's times where somebody who has more knowledge should talk or explain things. And so the more authoritative and understanding I feel, the more confidence I have.
Mm. I like too that she talks in this part right before that about proud subjection. Again,
Mm-hmm.
these fancy words here, but that obedience is something that you're proud of. It's worn as distinction, that the child has authority over themselves first to discipline themselves and to go, okay, I'm obeying, not because I'm forced to, not because you shamed me, not because I'm afraid I'm not going to punish if I don't do what you're saying here, but I'm choosing to self-regulate. I'm choosing to have that authority. I'm choosing to obey you. And I'm proud of the fact that I can control myself right now in the store, like you're asking.
Yes.
And that
We've
to me
even
is a huge difference from the way we approach this kind of authoritative
it's huge,
model today.
and it brings so much more peace to your homeschool. To even
Mm.
add to work on those habits instead of just, and that's why this is so beautiful because it is a philosophy. So we're not just saying, hey, do this for reading, do this for math, do this for science, and here's what you do. We're saying this is how you live in your homeschool. And when you recognize that there's a habit that needs addressing, deal with that habit.
Mm-hmm.
And that way your homeschool stays so much more peaceful because it says it is the part of the teacher to secure willing obedience, not so much to himself as to the laws of the school and the claims of the matter at hand. In other words, she skips down and she says the life that does not obey such conditions has got out of its orbit and is
Yes.
not of use to society. So we're recognizing, oh, wait a minute. Elizabeth is out of orbit here.
Mm-hmm.
How do I recognize that? I see that instead of me, like you're saying, have these anxious thoughts. Oh no, she's never going to learn how to read. What could be the issue there? And how do I bring her back into that orbit? That was a
Mm-hmm.
great metaphor for me.
Yeah, I
That's
like that.
authority. Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
me too.
yeah, the elliptical here. She says, the difference between do as you please is substituted for do as you're bid. There's a dissimulation in the air, and children fail to learn the habit of proud subjection and dignified obedience, which distinguishes great men and noble citizens. And then a little further on, that they must learn obedience. It is no small element in their happiness and ours, that obedience is both delightful and reposeful. Like it's peaceful.
Yes.
I like that.
I do too. Routines and those habits
Yes,
make
it peaceful.
it for that. They know they
everything doesn't have to be a constant argument.
Yes.
Because we've done this a million. This is just a habit. Once it becomes a habit, you don't have to have a debate about whether or not we're going to do morning time first. Do I have to do copy work for how many perfect C's do I have to make on this line before I'm done? Like, you don't have to have the debate because this is just what you do.
Yes, yes. And I get a lot of questions about that from people who don't homeschool. They say, how in the world do you get your children to sit down and do these things or do this every day? Because this is what we do at home. Mm-hmm. And we had to create those routines. We wake up, we have our breakfast, we have our Bible time, we have whatever your routine is. And so there's very little, I mean, of course we have the argument, like normal family, but right. And nobody asked me in the morning, are we starting with Bible time today?
Yeah.
We don't need to have those discussions. It's built into the routine. This is what we do every single day of our lives.
Right. Yeah. That eliminates a lot of, this is the habit of getting in the car. Like, just simple things, especially when they're younger, just eliminates so much anxiety and stress from your day. And going back to kind of education here on the bottom of page 71, she says, our chief concern for the mind or for the body is to supply a well-ordered table.
I knew you would bring this up.
One of my favorite quotes here. Where I got a gentle feast from, with abundant, appetizing, nourishing, and very varied food, which children deal with in their own way and for themselves. This food must be served au naturel. I love that.
Yeah.
Without pre-digestion, which deprives it of stimulating and nourishing properties, and no sort of forcible feeding or spoon feeding may be practiced. Hungry minds sit down to such a diet with the charming greediness of little children. They absorb it, assimilate it, and thereby grow in a manner astonishing to those accustomed to the dull, profitless ruminating so often practiced in schools. So, again, just kind of tying that concept back to, and I know you've all heard this quote before, and you've heard me say it a million times, the importance of feeding their minds here. Because children who are bored most likely are going to disobey. That happens when their minds are stimulated. They're interested in what's happening. They want to know what happens next. The tendency for them to do something that you don't want them to do is small because they're just excited. They're interested. They want to know what's happening. Right.
And I just love that phrase, the charming greediness of little children. And, when they're excited about something, what I found is normally when I find my children are bored with something, it's because it's not full of good ideas. It's not full of great. I'm not feeding their minds. Right. I have to take a step back and say, wait, okay, where is this boredom with this subject or book or whatever? Where is it coming from? Mm-hmm. And when you do put those ideas that feed their minds, you do see that charming greediness. It's not a negative greediness. It's that, read one more story. Please read one more chapter. Please. Oh, don't stop there. Can we do one more experiment? Mm-hmm. Can I stay up one more hour? And that's what I love. And so there's a word here we can't skip in the next line.
Okay.
When the teacher avoids hortatory.
I knew you've been practicing that.
I looked it up because there's no way I knew how to say that word. And I was really proud of myself that I figured that word out. Okay. Hortatory. So do you know what this word means, Julie?
Okay. I'm going to admit, when I read it, I did not know what it meant. I did look it up too.
I had to look it up.
I know. Sarah Mason, she uses those fancy words.
So smart. So smart. So I also got two things. First of all, I had to look it up. Second thing, then when I looked it up, I was like, ooh, I've done that. So it means urging methods. Urging, pushing, urging.
So when I looked up hortatory, I kind of felt like it was a combination of oratory, talk, speaking, and haughty.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like yak,
talking. Let me tell you everything I know about this. Because you don't know this. You're a little child. Let me help you out.
Yes. Which pretty much was the way I was trained to teach when I went to teacher college. Like, you have to learn about all of this, and then you have to chew it all up and understand it and teach it to the children.
And do it in a really fun, engaging way. Otherwise, they'll have no idea, and they won't want to pay attention to anything you're saying. You're pretty much put on a show all day long.
Yes, keep up to the show. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I just love this, but their mind is commonly to sit still during a lesson because they are so intent on their work that they have no desire for small divagations.
Oh, another fancy word.
Another fancy word. In other words, I guess I love that because it says, you think you're keeping their attention when you're urging or hotatory.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're looking for is the option that's different than that we're engaging them, because the greediness of their mind that we know that it's already there, we're harnessing that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're putting in front of them these, like she uses the food metaphor, these well-ordered table with abundant, appetizing, nourishing. It's like I feel when I see a charcuterie board. I'm like, ooh,
yeah, fancy charcuterie board. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give me some this little thing and that little thing. Everybody move, because I want all the little cheeses and
yes.
sticks and all the things. And, that's the way I want my kids to feel when they come to the school table.
Yeah, I love that.
Ooh, I read a few bites of that book about Linnaeus. That was really good.
Yeah.
And then I'm reading this book over here about Benjamin Franklin. I'm like, wow, that was really good. And just little, those things. Yeah, and I don't have to entertain.
Yes, for sure. And she goes on in here and kind of talks about how, like, in her day, they were doing a really good job of training children's bodies. When I read through this, I realize we're not even doing that no more. We're not training their minds or their bodies. But she's saying, you guys have a very good understanding that children need to be outside and they need to have gymnastics and they need to do these folk dances and gardening. But that's not all, is kind of what she's saying. Like, you guys are doing well with that. We don't do any of those things in school anymore. Sadly, they're not. Their minds aren't growing and their bodies aren't either. But besides, she was saying back then they did have a good understanding of that. That field of physiology was growing in the early 1900s, right? But she said these things don't sustain a mind. They need, she goes in here to talks about Shakespeare and relations with a lot of different material and places and people in the wide universe in the past and economics and even arithmetic. That we need to be providing these things as well. I liked here she talks about on page 73, the sense of must should be present with children. That. Our mistake is to act in such a way that they only seem to be law compelled while their elders do as they please. Ooh, okay. So
yes,
you want your children to have the habit of consistently doing their work. Are you having a habit of consistently doing the things that you're supposed to be doing? Oh, wait, no, I don't.
Yes. It's kind of like that do as I say and not as I do.
Yes.
And, one way I've really seen this in our own, I've never seen myself as artistic ever. I was kind of like, I wasn't the artistic one. I was the brainy one, right? Because I love to read. Mm-hmm. So when about probably 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a conference and they were talking about alongside was sort of the thing. You need to be doing these things alongside your children, not just like, okay, here's an art lesson, go do it. But sit down and do the picture study a lot. You're doing everything alongside. So I started doing these alongside my children, these art lessons. And not only was it a blessing for me, but I really watched my children watch me learn these things and do these things. I come under the authority of that teacher, and that was just a video. Like she says, he is posed as a person in authority, not under authority. Right. And so I come under authority of that teacher. Okay, I'm going to do my lesson. And I started to see a difference in them, how they took things seriously. Okay, I'm going to do my little homework this week. I'm going to do my little practice, And so then they're going to take it seriously. So that taught me a good lesson to expand in other ways of my life. Like they are watching how I treat my own self-education. They're seeing, how does mama live when it comes to learning things and doing the things she needs to do. They notice. And that was a good reminder for me, a good lesson for me.
Yeah. I like the word must here. I think if you really believe something must happen, it will get done. Right. If someone's coming over to your house for dinner, the house must be clean. Right. If nobody's coming and it's a Saturday and you got nothing going on, maybe we should pick up some stuff, work in the garage. But that game's on. I'd much rather watch that. There's no compelling driving force. So she's, saying this sense, we need to give our kids this sense of must, that propels them, that motivates them for why am I doing this? Why do I need to read this book? What's the purpose behind this? Feeding your mind is a must. It's not an option. Yes. And that will be something that they'll always have, like you're saying with them.
Yes, life skill. That's a life skill, like the things that have to be done. And I do think that that's one of the ways that when we harness that sense of must, that's one of the ways that we keep there from being so much arguing about what needs to be done. Like this is your list and there's no options here. I mean, that this has to be done every single week. These, we're going to do this, we're going to, and you add that to the delight and you put all those things in the blender, the sense of must, and you're offering this abundant thing. And it comes out with a school day that's pleasant. Instead of you dragging your kids behind you and saying, oh, we have to. And I know you and I have talked about, do you get to, do you have to, or do you get to? Right. We get to do this today. We are blessed to get to do this today.
Yeah, that mindset word is powerful there. And then she says, there are 2 conditions necessary to secure all proper docility and obedience. And given these 2, there's seldom a conflict of wills between teacher and pupil. All right, you ready for these 2 conditions here? These are important. I like this. Charlotte, too. I can handle 2, right? The teacher is not focused on arbitrary laws, but a teacher realizes that they're under God's authority. It sounds really easy condition until you read it and you're like, oh, could you pick something easier, Charlotte? Really?
Something that doesn't convict us and make us have to consider our own lives.
Oh boy, and showing our kids, that we are under that authority. And part of it is, I think, what Charlotte Mason talks about, and parents of children, that we're cooperating with the divine teacher. Do we have trust that if you don't figure this out today, it's okay because you're going to learn to figure this out? Or is it this pressure we have to figure it out right now? Or if I'm not the fountainhead of all knowledge, my children won't learn XYZ. Or do I realize I'm under the authority of God? I am partnering with the divine teacher. I do trust that these seeds are going to grow into you.
Right. And we get questions like that about even as simple things. Oh my goodness, what if I don't have a history spine that tells everything that happens from 1800 to 1900? Every single event, every
with
single
a bunch of vocabulary words and important people and places. They're never going to get anything. Shay, come on.
And then what if they take a multiple choice test and they miss, and it does all come back to that divine teacher and the trust that your child will take away what your child needs from the text that is in front of them, from these living ideas, and that you will take away what do I trust that God's going to bring to my life, what I need to be educated, or that I need for my life? Do I trust that I'm as much under his authority as my children are? I mean, that's not just an educational philosophy. That's why Charlotte Mason gets all in our business. She gets all up in our business.
I know. I don't like it, Charlotte. Just give me a checklist. Let me go about my own way. We're focusing on the kids here, Charlotte.
I'm like, but wait a minute. Now you're in my business. Now I got to consider how I think about my whole life, So, yeah.
Right. So the first principle it's all us, right? That's the first principle. Basically, she's saying, get yourself in order here. You got to realize who you're under authority of. Get yourself in order first. Okay. Then the second principle is children should have a fine sense of the freedom which comes of knowledge, which they are allowed to appropriate as they choose, freely given. Oh, here's the kicker: with little intervention from the teacher. They do choose and are happy in their work, so there is little opportunity for coercion or deadening, here's that word, hortatory talk. Did I say it right?
Yes, you said it right. Yes. I absolutely love that quote because, I literally wrote down in my notes the phrase, a fine sense of freedom.
Ooh, yes.
I'm like, wow, that is really what I want my children to have, is that fine sense of freedom. And here's what happens, I think, when I read this. I'm like, okay, are my children happy in their work? If they're not, I have to back up. Why are they not happy in my work? I mean, I'm just taking this down to my own practical life here. And so I think, am I coercing them? Is my talk deadening and hortatory? And so if it is, then I'm okay, forget about condition 1. Okay, now condition 2, and then we wonder why there's not proper docility and obedience. And so there's a lot there to take and chew on and think about your own homeschool and your own life. And, I love to give too much intervention. I know that about myself.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think too, some people could read this and go, okay, well, is Charlotte Mason like unschooling here? Like, do they have the freedom just to choose whatever it is they want to learn about?
Oh, that's a good point.
Right. And that's
Right.
not what she's saying.
Yes. No, not at all. Right. That's a great point.
The freedom
Yes.
comes the more you know about something, the more knowledge that you have, the more living ideas you have. Like the freer you are to live as a person is what she's saying here. And they're free to choose what ideas they take and make their own through the process of narration. There's freedom in that. It's not, you must complete this worksheet. You must fill in all these answers. I'm telling you what to do. That's different than the freedom of, I'm encountering these things. I'm out in nature and I'm choosing to what I want to observe, what I want to put in my nature book. It's not, okay, class, today we're going to have a lesson on and everybody, you know, and there may be times where you're doing object studies. That's not what I'm saying. But like ultimately the child has some freedom in what they're choosing.
Yes, which is quite different than saying, "Oh, just go pick whatever you want to learn about." No, totally she says we're tying all this together because we're saying, you know, I'm giving you this feast of ideas, and I'm giving you the freedom to that comes from the knowledge that you're allowed to appropriate as that you choose. So, you know, my issue is a lot of times when I hear a narration, I'm like, I don't do as much as I used to. I stop myself a whole lot more now, but I would lie to you if I said I don't do it anymore. I'm like, oh man, they missed this and this in that story. You didn't even mention blah, blah, blah. What about so-and-so? I mean, you didn't notice that? It was so good. And you know, yeah, it's hortatory.
I'm going to get you a shirt that says that, by the way. And like,
yes,
hortatory with like a big circle with an X in the middle, you know, no hortatory. We don't want that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I need to give me a t-shirt.
People be like, what does that say?
And then I could launch into a big tirade about Charlotte Mason and bore everybody.
You could do some oratory.
Then they would be like, okay, that is the definition of that t-shirt that you are wearing.
Oh goodness, we're on fire today. Okay. But I think number two, the two conditions here. The children can't have the freedom to take what they need from the feast if number one hasn't happened first. If the parent doesn't realize that they're cooperating with the divine teacher and under God's authority, they can't allow their children to have that freedom. That's where that coercion in the hortatory comes in. Yeah. To fix that.
Yes, because it's from anxiety.
Yeah, I'm going to fix this. It's my responsibility. It's all on my shoulders. I got to figure out this problem and solve this, and we got to work on it right this second.
Yes, and she even says that at the bottom of the page. She says, this time she's talking about repetition, but she says to allow repetition of a lesson is to shift the responsibility for it from the shoulders of the pupil to those of the teacher, who says in effect, I'll see that you know it, so that his pupils make no effort of attention.
Yes. That's huge. My fifth graders will be like, is this going to be on the test? Do I actually need to know this? Because I'm up here doing all the work, making these PowerPoints, learning all this stuff and trying to explain it in a way that you're actually going to understand it. They're putting forth no effort.
Right, because they don't have to. And we haven't, like it talks about, we haven't given them the awareness of their responsibility of learning and taught them, this is her quoting in the beginning of that same paragraph, that it is their business to know that which has been taught. And this is why we don't repeat. And it still infuriates my children if I, you know, especially during dictation. You know, if I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not repeating that phrase. You know, we've been studying this copywork all week and I'm not repeating it. Or if I'm reading something and they're like, oh, I didn't, that lesson won't get repeated. It still makes them crazy, but it does do that thing. Okay, it's on you. I don't have to make sure you get that. It is your habit of attention to make sure that you get it.
Yeah, that's good. Can you read the part that started that paragraph? I really like that too. It kind of ties in with what you're saying here. And I think it's something we say this over and over, but there's a reason. And there's a reason why Charlotte, if you read her words, there's a lot of repetition, right? It's not like every volume comes out with some brand new concept that wasn't explained before. She's saying, we need to hear this stuff over and over so we get it in our heads.
Yes. So to this end, the subject matter should not be repeated. We ourselves do not attend to the matters in our daily paper, which we know we shall meet with again in a weekly review, nor to that if there is a monthly review in prospect. These repeated aids result in our being persons of wandering attention and feeble memory.
Yeah, and I like the very first verse says, all schoolwork should be conducted in such a manner that children are aware of the responsibility of learning. It is their business to know what has been taught.
Their business.
Right. And she's saying we don't have to keep reviewing it to make sure that they learn it. Thank goodness. Oh my word. I mean, I remember as a teacher, we had to keep reviewing and having these little like Jeopardy trivia game and like see if we can remember everything that I taught this week. And I thought about the difference between that and like what I do in a Gentle Feast where we have like our weekly narration notebook where once a week they're picking something and they're talking about it again. Mm-hmm. That's not review. Me as the teacher's not going, okay, this week in history, we learned about the stock market crash. Here are the 5 important parts. Right. No, it's, hey, this week we talked about the stock market crash. Can you tell me about it again? The child, yes. The child's choosing what to talk about, so I wouldn't tell them to talk about that. But if they pick the stock market crash, for instance, then they're going to tell it back to me again. It's going deeper into their long-term memory. And then when we have, like she says, monthly review here, when we have our end of the term exams and they're narrating it again, they're choosing what to talk about, what to bring out in those exams, and it's reinforcing the learning for themselves. It's their effort.
And I get so many people ask the question, or even people that have seen our exams that we, our exam papers we put up, like, how did they remember that long afterwards if you're not reviewing? Because they chose to learn it. It's what they took away from that. This is not, will some
they're not cramming it in there so they can forget it. Yeah, because it's not what I thought was important.
Right. They were excited about this. And if you're excited about something, if I'm excited about a book I read a month ago, I don't have any problems telling you about it today because I was excited about it. And so if they were excited about whatever the thing we talked about a month ago, they're like, oh, yes. Oh, I get to talk about that again. Absolutely. I get to draw a picture of that. That's amazing. You want me to act that out? Awesome. Instead of them saying, oh, gosh, I don't remember the 5 steps of blah, 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 or the dates of. It's such a different mindset and such a different atmosphere. Instead of the anxiety of, oh, did I learn it? It's, oh, let me tell you what I learned. This is totally different.
And one of my favorite quotes from this whole section is on the next page. Teachers are apt to slight their high office and hinder the processes of education because they cherish 2 or 3 fallacies. So these are some kind of wrong thinking here that we often have. Okay, here's the first one. They regard children as inferior. The second one, they regard themselves as superior. Why else their office? Like, I'm an adult, I'm a teacher, I'm in charge, right?
Yes, right. I know all the things.
But if they recognize that the potency of children's minds is as great or greater than that of their own, they would not conceive that spoon feeding was their mission, or that they must masticate a morsel of knowledge to make it proper for the feedable digestion of the scholar. So again, it's her amazingly high view of children here, which makes this make sense. It's not the authority servant model. This is not what she's talking about here. It's this.
Yes,
we are equal in our quest for knowledge here. A child actually might be even a little bit higher because they're able to process things that in our minds, in the way that they've been stuck for years, we can't see these ideas anymore. We don't have that innate curiosity and drive that they're born with. And if we haven't stifled it out of them, that they still have. So they can. And I've seen that with my own kids reading Plutarch or Pilgrim's Progress, especially. They're definitely.
Yes, and their curiosity is so untamped down like ours has. I was not educated this way, so I'm really great at tell me what you want me to learn. I'll spit it back out. I mean, I feel like my mind is trained more since I've been homeschooling. Not to be that way, but even this one fallacy here, this can really turn people up on his head when we say to them, listen, children are not inferior. We are not superior. If you just that one fallacy, if you say that to them, that can really turn people. They're like, what? What do you mean? What are you saying here? Much less the second one that we get to.
Right. So, and then there's another way we deprecate children. We are convinced they can't understand a literary vocabulary, so explain and paraphrase to our heart's content, but not to theirs. Yep. Again, it's important to have that high view of children here. And then I like this one, at the end of the page, she says, there it is in every child, a full measure, a very Niagara of force, ready to be turned on in obedience to the child's own authority and capable of infinite resistance to authority imposed from without. So this process, what it does is it helps the child develop their own self-government. They learn to have good habits. They're trained in kind of right ordered thinking so that they can have the self-authority to go, what should I do here? Because children I've been to Niagara Falls. It is loud and it's powerful. So imagine that inside of your child. That force can be used for good or ill. It can be used to have them go in the right direction, have that authority from within themselves, but it could also be to resist with, what was it? Infinite resistance. And we're not like never-ending resistance.
Infinite resistance. I'm never doing what you asked me to.
I'm going to dig my heels in, and I'm not listening.
Ever. And I think that's one thing that I love, that is how she respects that in a child, instead of saying, we have to tamp that down and we have to stop that. What she's saying is, hey, this is in your child and it's powerful. Use it. Respect it and use it. And that allows us to come alongside our children instead of that exhausting, like, how do I get them to obey?
Because I told you so.
Yes, right. I'm exhausted. She's saying, wait a minute, okay, this is there. And she tells us what our part is. In the next sentence, our part is to regard attention to as an appetite and to feed it with the best we have in books and in all knowledge. And so that's my job is, okay, what do I put in front of them so that this, Niagara of force is fed with the best I have in books and knowledge? How do I do that? That's my job.
And by feeding those minds and building that habit of attention. And she says too, that we are not Sir Oracle anymore. We can stop playing that part, right? We don't have to have all wisdom and be talking all day long and let me tell you everything that you need to be doing and why you need to be doing it and what's going to happen if you don't do it. That you're right. That is exhausting, right? And so she's saying, like, later, the smooth and easy days, she's talking about this power of habit training to train that force. We want that motivation to be coming from within them because, like, I think it's somewhere in here, like, at some point we're not going to be there telling them what to do. So they have to have that force trained within themselves to be able to guide and direct their decisions there. And it made me laugh too because, I still have that force. Like, I don't like people.
Yes.
There was somebody the other day, I was like, oh, no, you ain't telling me what to do. Oh, no. It ain't going to happen. Like, I was sticking my heels in like a little 2-year-old. Like, nope, ain't doing it now because you told me to. I was going to do it, but just because you told me to do it, now I'm not doing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 45 years old, right? Like, and I still think this. But I can, I know I've seen in my own life the fruits of the time where I have been self-disciplined and I have worked really hard towards goal or something like that. And it's like, oh, that force is a wrecking ball too. Like, get out of that way, right? So we have that within us just as much as our children do.
Yes. And, that's why she talks about, and so many times is why she talks about habits over and over and over again, because it's easy for us to just say, we just want our children to do what we want them to do. And to do whatever it takes to get results. That's what we want. But when you back up and you have to say, okay, what choices do I need to make to harness that force? That's where the work comes in. That's where the stopping, the thinking, the considering, the philosophy. And just handing a child a textbook is just not going to harness that force. It's just not going to. And so then you have frustration and all these other things that come from that. And like, why? I just want them to get it done. I just want to finish school. I just want to get it done. I understand that. And there's days we want to get it done too. But I see the difference in my own daily schooling when I'm like, Shay, you did not feed that with the best we have. You're not harnessing that Niagara force.
And then she goes on, she says, I have one more disability which hinders us in our work as teachers. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase it here because it's kind of wordy here, but she's saying that the person is saying, our only job as teachers is to give them enough knowledge so that they can earn a living and they know how to be good citizens. That's enough.
Yep, that's enough.
And I hear it all the time. And she's saying, nope, that is not enough. The more the man is as a person, the more valuable will be his work and the more dependable his conduct. So by training them in these good habits, by filling them with these living ideas, you are creating
Yes.
a much richer person, that richer person will
Yes.
do better work. They will
Yes.
know how to behave as
We get
a citizen. You will want to hire them rather than spending all the time going, oh, well, they just need to learn how to make, they just need to learn the skills so they can learn how to make a living, and we're good here.
And we get that question about high school. I mean, I just had somebody ask me a few weeks ago, do I still need to do morning time with my high schooler? I mean, do they still need to do picture study? What about poetry? Don't they just need to get their credits? Right? And I understand there's hoops we have to jump through in high school. I get that.
Too. And sometimes
but
you're dealing with a lot more attitude than it's worth fighting. Right.
You are, and I get that. But I do think it's so important. Like, I want my kids to have that same sense of must about poetry in high school as they do an art and beauty as much as they do about science and math and English and the writing and stuff they just have to get the credits for. I mean, and that's why I'm like, yes, we do sit down, and maybe it looks a little different. Maybe we're doing it at night because I understand kids work, they have other classes they have to go to, and maybe they're doing rolling and stuff. But the fact that we have to put things in front of them that are more than just about get the work done and, what is your job going to be? And that, yes, we need to train our kids. I think it's important, but it's amazing how much even older kids will take away from the beauty of poetry read alouds. I still read aloud till they leave. We're still reading aloud, and yes, it looks different. They may miss a chapter or two, but for them to have that, there's more than just the have to get the job done every day. I think that is so important for those older children.
Yes, and I'm so glad she brings that up because I still feel like that is a huge kind of mindset shift of our culture, that we're here to get them to the point where they can either have a job skill or they can go to college and check off those boxes. And no, you're raising a magnanimous person. How large is the room and how much their feet are? That's a totally different mind approach. And but what she's saying here is it gets the thing that you're wanting. It will make them a good employee, right? In fact, it'll make them a better employee to have those things. And it's interesting. I always talk about this in one of my talks, is that Google study from 2018, Project Oxygen, where they studied like the top traits of their employees. And out of the 8 characteristics or whatever, STEM skills were dead last, and whether or not they would be a good employee at Google, dead last. All the rest were what you would call either soft skills, like things you get from humanities, from studying like poetry, art, music, living books, reading, talking, right? The ability to have empathy, the ability to think outside the box, the ability to communicate with other people. That was what made you a good employee at Google. That's what a Charlotte Mason education gives you. Yes, those STEM skills, you're still getting those, right? But those aren't the be all end all. If you don't have these things as a person, the life that you're going to have will be diminished, I think, personally.
Yes. And those things don't just jump out the door because you turn 16 years old and now you got to get high school credits. We're saying that, yes, okay, maybe we've been doing picture study for, 10 years of school, and now you're in the 10th grade, 11th grade, and now we're done with that, and you don't need that. Maybe it looks different, but it's so important to still put those out there so that they are able to keep those skills fresh and they're still in front of them every single day.
Yeah. On page 77, I like the quote where she says, "It will be noticed that the child is educating herself. Her friends merely take her to see the things she knows about, and she tells what she has read. A quite different matter from the act of pouring information down the throats of unhappy children who are taken to visit our national treasure houses." And I've seen this with the school children I would take on field trips, and they're like, "Why? This is so boring. Why can't we go do something fun?" To when I'm homeschooling my old children and we're reading something and, we're on a museum tour and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool. This is so interesting." And they're asking the person a million questions. And the guy's like, "Where'd you find these children?"
And because their minds are stimulated by ideas in books, when they get into the real world, those same ideas they're attaching to that place. That's one of the reasons I love, and I love what he talks. I've seen this difference between field trips, educational trips, like she talks about here, and and you're like, okay, we went in, we were in DC. This has been several years ago. Our children were small, and there was a school group there. They had clipboards.
No, I believe you've done that before.
They had clipboards with pencils and these little, I guess it was worksheets. I didn't like. They were marking. They were marking on their clipboards the things that they were, and it broke my heart because I thought, you don't have the opportunity to connect to anything that you see around it. You don't have time to look at a piece of art
that you think
or a piece of history or
yeah.
yes, or consider it for yourself. Like, oh, I recognize this, or I like that, or do I like that, or this is large, this is small. No connections, because everything that you are allowed to think is on this sheet that's in front of you, and it's very, very heartbreaking. And we're just not going to.
She's like, ain't happening over here. Thank you.
No, not doing, no, but
like, and I think it really ties in with what this whole chapter is about, because they don't have the freedom to pick what they want to learn about or to know. Again, it's not what do you want to learn today, right? But it's, I'm at this thing. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that reminds me of such and such. And oh, I'd rather go here and look at that painting than this painting. When the worksheet says, what date was such and such painted? And I have to fill in this thing, right? I don't have the freedom within me to make my own choices and to feed my own mind. And that is extremely frustrating, especially if you are the more creative and the more intelligent you are, the more frustrating that is. That whole Niagara Force is going to come out at some point.
That's what I'm going to say. And I was about to say, and it sets up for poor behavior. Because there's frustration inside.
You gave me a clipboard and sent me. I've been to the Smithsonian several times when we lived there. It's a fascinating place. And you gave me a clipboard and told me what I had to look at and what I had to know was important. Oh, that Niagara Force to be coming out. Let me tell you.
Yes, and you missed the connection. This is one reason I love nature walks, is because, I don't have to, and we might do nature talks at home about a certain thing. We're going to go walk and maybe look for that thing. But you get to see into the mind of your own children when you take the time to listen to what they saw that mattered. What did you see that mattered? What did you see that stuck out to you? What did you see that piqued your interest or reminded you of something? And otherwise, it's only what somebody who's in authority, quote unquote, over them thinks is important.
Yeah, and then speaking of this, we're just going to check off all the boxes here so you can get a job kind of thing. She goes on to say, on the next page, consider what this power of perfect attention and absolute recollection should be to every employer. What an asset to the nation. I mean, can you imagine if you had an employee who could play perfect attention and have absolute recollection? And obviously that's not possible, right? We all are human. But the way that she's trained, the way that you're training your children in the habit of attention, right? And the ability to recall based on narration and listening, active listening, and ordering and sequencing and communicating. Yes. What an asset. Every
single
the
job.
Whole world is wide open to you.
Yes. And not only that, is you're so able to learn because you understand what you don't know.
And you have the curiosity and the freedom to want to find the answers to what you don't know. Those are the most successful people. I can't remember. I'll find it. There's a study, but it was some of the most successful people, it's their ability to self-educate that makes them successful, especially in today's changing world. And COVID, there were several articles I read about this. The people that were succeeding when they lost their job, they were figuring out how to learn a new skill, learn a new concept, learn something else, how to market themselves. And they were finding different work because they understand how to figure things out. They're not locked into, I was trained how to do this because this might not be around next year.
Right. And sometimes we get afraid of that freedom with children. I think parents are afraid, well, if I give my children the freedom to learn something on their own or to have that sense of freedom to pick and choose, what if they don't learn what they should, quote unquote, that big word should. And the thing is, well, what does their mind and their life, what's the should for them? It probably doesn't look like the should for you. It probably doesn't look like the should for who's next door, because that's where we go back to trusting the divine teacher. Yes. Condition number 1, all the way back.
And then she ends here, with something that was sad. She was talking about the soldiers returning from World War I and kind of seeing these maimed soldiers with different injuries, a lifeless hand or leg, an artificial nose or jaw. I mean, I just can't imagine the devastation that she was seeing. And she goes on to say, but many of our young men and women go about more seriously maimed than these. They are devoid of intellectual interests, history, and poetry are without charm for them. The scientific work of the day is only slightly interesting. Their job and the social amenities they can secure are all that life has for them. I mean,
It's heartbreaking, isn't it?
I think it's convicting when you think about maiming. I think it's an injury to a person to deprive them of these things, to deprive them of the rich beauty and art and living ideas. She says, the maimed existence in which a man goes on from day to day without either nourishing or using his intellect is causing anxiety to those who are interested in education, who know that after religion, it is our chief concern, is indeed the necessary handmaiden of religion.
I mean, it's so deep just to think that we're saying if we don't put this feast of ideas in front of our children with the freedom to take what they need while trusting that they and us are all under the authority of the divine teacher, then we are hindering their ability to function in the world, which is what maiming does. We are hindering their ability to function.
I think that's true. We see that. I see that in a lot of people. They don't know how to handle really hard things that are happening in their life. They don't know how to continue to nourish and feed their minds. And it is sad to see and watch. And it does produce anxiety, like she's saying here. So, I mean, she's so insightful.
That's right. And so ahead of her time, because the thing that stuck out to me there when I read this is that their job and the social amenities that they can secure are all that their life has for them. And, you know, we do see some people who, whatever their work is and whatever social media that they are connected to, that's all that they have that interest in them. There is nothing that they're connected to or they pursue intellectually or they're interested in or they're going after or they're willing to, you know, pay attention to. And, you know, if we want to raise children that look differently, act differently, and we want them to not be maimed, you know, we really have to pay attention to some of these convicting things that she talks about, I think, in this chapter that really are self-reflection for parents. How do I stop and really look at my own homeschool, my own life, my interaction with my own children, my expectations of them? What am I putting in front of them? What do I notice when they're out of orbit?
Yeah.
Do I just freak out or do I say, okay, wait, they're out of orbit, so I need to bring them back in? How do I, you know, all these things are really considered parenting, not just reactive
Thank
parenting.
you for saying that. Yes, it's very intentional here because, and I think, again, that goes back to how we started, right? With the mindset I had when I first saw the chapter heading of authority and docility, my first thought went to like authoritative parenting. I'm like, I really hope this chapter's not about that. Like, and it wasn't, right, at all.
You're not gonna like it if it is.
And I love that about her because she had such a high view of children, and it's not a free for all either, right? It's not permissive parenting, so you know, it's finding this, like you're saying, this kind of orbiting, this balance, this working together here. We're both in this quest for knowledge. I realize I have to feed your mind. I have to help train you in good habits so that you are able to govern yourself, that you do have that self-authority, that it does need to be coming from you and not from this outside me, the authority all the time, or it's not going to grow inside of you and you're not going to change as a person. You're just going to do what I say when I'm here kind of thing. And it's convicting, right? That is it's somewhat easier sometimes just to think like, I just need a sticker chart and that will just solve all my problems. Or if I just read this discipline book and, you know, I follow these 10 steps, then my children will be perfectly obedient. That's not how it works.
And I don't ever read her volumes that I don't walk, or any chapter that I don't shut the book with more respect for my children.
That's great.
Always, I have more respect for my kids and more respect for their minds and more respect for their potentials and their possibilities, and excited about, okay, well, this doesn't have to be dry. It doesn't have to be boring. This can be a joint effort, which is much more fun than, hey, can you just get your schoolwork done? I mean, just do it.
Pushing and pulling and prodding.
And it's not
exhausting. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be dragging the the cart.
Yes. No. And you know, and also especially now I think that I have grown children that, are left home. What a privilege that I got to see into their minds for those years that they were home.
It is a gift.
Because we've educated this way, and I made lots of mistakes, but to see into their minds and really find out, understand who they are as people, and wow, this interested you. But I'm really grateful for that privilege, and that's why I'm grateful for these volumes. I need to read them over and over again.
And I did talk about this in one of my talks too, about like the vision that you have for your children someday, and I remember journaling about this, way back when, and one of the things was I want us to be able to have interesting conversations someday. So like, it was like, what do I want it to be like when everybody's grown and they bring their grandkids over for Thanksgiving dinner and we're all sitting around the table? Like, what do I want it to be like? What experiences do I want us to have to remember by, or what kind of people do I want to have in my family? And it was, part of it was this kind of magnanimous person, like the ability to, oh, here's what I'm learning about, blah, 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 blah. And here, oh, what do you think about the such and such? And being able to have intelligent conversations with people. And in order to have that, you can't have like this maimed person here who sounds like their whole life is Groundhog's Day and they're just doing everything to survive and every day is the same and they're not feeding themselves at all. I don't want that. Right. I want to have that stimulation.
We've talked before about starting at the goal and backing up to how to get there. And so that's so important that you ask yourself those questions. And then, so tomorrow, what do I need? What does school look like tomorrow? Yes. So that 20 years from now, this is the end result. How do I do that? What does that look like? And it does require self-reflection and consideration for what your school day looks like and what materials you use and, what your priorities are. But I really feel like it's so worth it. I wish I had, I wish I didn't have, well, this is sad. When I started homeschooling, the internet was email. Okay. I mean, that's how that was it. So it would have been so lovely to have these things. I was reading these volumes on my own back then and trying to digest and figure it out, to have somebody say, think about the end game and start backwards. And how do you figure these things out tomorrow so that you look at your kids when they are 23, 24, 25 and say, okay, yes, those are the choices.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Bible verse, without vision, the people perish. And I think in the nitty gritty day in and day out, and someone's throwing a temper tantrum and the baby pooped on the carpet and whatever, like it feels like you're perishing, and you need to have that vision to go, no, this is why I'm doing it this way, and to have that trust and faith, and to have that ability to go under the authority of the divine teacher and go, no, there's a reason for this. I'm getting to this goal where someday, whatever it is for you all, but for me, one of them was to have these magnanimous children as adults, and so we're going to keep going on this path. I'm not going to stress out about XYZ because I know that I'm consistently putting seeds into my children's minds that are going to add up to this life, to this person. And chapter 5, which we are definitely getting to next month in May, because we are now on the month time of our book club. Yes, one chapter a month.
Yes, we're on it. It's good. I already read it, and it was really, I read it before, but I read it again
it picks
last
up
week,
on
it's really
this concept of authority and docility. It's the sacredness of personality. So children are born persons. If you don't have this high view of children, you can't understand this concept of authority and docility either. So.
More convicting information.
We will convict your pants off of you next time. So stay tuned and join us next month. All right, bye, girl.